I think first up, we have a really cool tribrid of exchange here that will go on between AI, sustainability, and of course, blockchain technology. So Maya, I'll let you take it away and maybe give a round of applause to the panelists before we start. Thank you.
So thank you. Yeah, let's just jump into it. I'm super happy to be talking here today with three ninjas from their respective fields. Shane from UNICEF, Michaela from Impact Scope, and Flo from Deep Labs and Deep Square. I'm just going to run a quick round of introduction, so maybe just a few seconds. How do you fit into the story of blockchain, AI, and sustainability?
Okay. Hi, everyone. So my name is Shane O'Connor. I'm from UNICEF. Hopefully, most of you here have heard of UNICEF, but maybe you're asking why we're here in this particular space. Well, UNICEF is the UN agency that has a mandate for improving outcomes for children around the world. One of our modalities for doing that is we have an Office of Innovation, where we focus on trying to bring external new frontier technologies to bear on UNICEF's programming around the world. We have a venture fund where we invest in startups operating in frontier tech. And we also have a crypto fund, the first UN agency to have a crypto fund, which we can invest in our startups around the world. And what we, at least in UNICEF, term emerging tech or frontier tech includes AI and blockchain. So I think that's why we're here.
Yep, fits in. Michele?
Hi, I am Michele Soavi, Chief Sustainability Officer at Impascope, where we use Web3 tools to create sustainable growth. So my background is more around the intersection of blockchain, sustainability, and finance. But at the Sustainability Working Group, we have been working on something related to the topic of AI. That's why I got somehow involved. And I will tell you a bit more later about what we are doing.
Thank you. Flo?
Hi, everyone. I am Florin from Deep Lab. And I think what we are building at Deep Lab is a decentralized supercomputer. Decentralization means that we are leveraging blockchain technology to allow people to get access to compute supercomputers from all the places in the world. And then clearly it's a supercomputer, so we need AI. And when you look at what AI is, you need a lot of computing power, and computing power is generating a lot of heat. So there is a very tight link between sustainability and AI as well. And if you want AI to become available everywhere, you need to be very careful on the link with sustainability as well.
Okay. So let's just jump into defining. I guess everyone here is familiar with terms of AI and blockchain, but based on my small research, when you ask people what sustainability is, you get way different answers. So knowing that you are coming from different backgrounds, I'm super curious about how would you define sustainability?
Yeah, I mean, depending on what we're talking about particularly, there's different aspects to it. For us, with the venture fund, sustainability is making sure that the investments that we make in our startup firms have a good chance of thriving, continuing to grow. And one of the important parts of sustainability as well is we have seen from a UNICEF perspective that it is not sustainable necessarily to have technology companies come and necessarily do all their work in what UNICEF would call program countries. Mm-hmm. Quite often we find that to ensure or to give a good chance for sustainability for technology solutions and for startups is to invest in local startups. So if we're looking to do a program in Nigeria, then we should try and invest in Nigerian companies, I mean.
Okay, so I guess I'm really bothered personally that sustainability is narrowed down to energy use, so I'm super happy whenever someone offers alternative approaches to it. Michele?
Yeah, I would like to build a bit on what you were saying. You know, it's a bit sad that you see that the narrative around AI start to be really similar, to one around Bitcoin and, crypto world when it all started, in the sense that a lot of focus got put, on the energy consumption, which may be true, but on the other hand, you must I would say it's always important to remember, like, okay, it's a very early stage. And, if you compare it like to the internet in the 80s or the 90s, like the infrastructure was really slow. And, the data which you could transmit was somehow really limited. So I would say we should be able to build a narrative which is not associated, just to energy consumption. But on the other hand, what we should worry more when it comes to sustainability in the context of AI, it's more, on the data you use, on the model you use, so that you make sure you are able somehow to integrate, mostly from an ethical perspective, such considerations. And again, not so much focusing on energy consumption, because it's really limiting the discussion.
So what I would add here is that energy consumption is one thing. Then one other thing, we were discussing also this before, is if you look at big models being trained, people say that, for example, training a GPT-4 or GPT-3 costed 40 million liters of water. And then you could be afraid of that and saying that we should just stop this because that's not the way to go. But at the end of the day, it's really possible to reuse that water to actually heat up buildings and make use of that water, which would mean that if you do it in that way, then that water is actually useful. So you don't need to count it into as a negative aspect. And I think we need to accept that if we want this technology to thrive, we need to try to do it in the best way and not be afraid of the bad aspect that it could bring, but try to do it in a way that prevent them. Yeah.
And then if we talk about the sustainability in context of what blockchain and AI can do, is it possible that combining blockchain and AI can close the circle and help companies, institutions progress towards SDGs or something in a context?
So I would say in that sense, it's clearly less about energy consumption and those things, and more about the other goals that, for example, UNICEF is trying to do, like giving access to the technology. Because one thing we should really prevent, we shouldn't let this happen, is that big companies would just basically take it all, and that people that would leverage those technology from poorer country would actually leverage technologies that are in other countries. We should really try to make this happen also in the country themselves. So I think in terms of inclusion and education, blockchain and all the transparency around that can really help.
Okay, and now when we open the topic about education, Shane, the stakeholders you're representing, obviously education is a huge part. Open source technologies, how all of it fits in to progressing and allowing equal access to education.
Yeah, so UNICEF is a UN organization, and we have an equity lens on everything that we do. So UNICEF is about promoting, improving outcomes for children. And that equity lens is in the delivery of quality education, quality healthcare, protection, social policy is how it's normally manifested at a country level. When we do our work in the Office of Innovation and in technology for UNICEF, how do we translate equity into that side of things? Yep. And open source is kind of the way that we use to really try and be equitable in how we deliver our technologies. So our venture fund, for example, so we invest in startups. We don't take equity at all in any of the startups. So our equity is the open sourcing of the product or the platform. So the thesis is that will lower some of the barriers that some countries, individuals might have to accessing technology that might be too costly, but still beneficial. And particularly we see a lot of our investments in the past. We've had cohorts around education, AI in education, so helping with learning. We've had a couple of chatbots as well that we have invested in. We've had blockchain financial inclusion companies part of our cohort about 18 months ago, I think. So really the open sourcing is the kind of equity trying to deliver quality services through the technology. at the country level.
Okay, but then that actually supports, so you mentioned education, so you educate people around AI and blockchain, and then you need to have, I guess, some system to support them to apply the knowledge they have. So again, through open source technologies, I guess.
Yeah, so like part of the process, when a company comes into the venture fund, we invest and there's a whole year of mentoring with them, and there sometimes can be a journey for open source for some of the companies, but it's heartening to see sometimes that the companies, when they come out the other side of that journey, they have had a really good experience, and they're, let's say, more converted to the idea of open source being useful for them, and that they can make money at the same time as well. I've like recently a company that came out of one of our financial inclusion cohorts, an Argentinian company. I remember the CEO talking to me, and he said the thing that got his staff most excited was working on the UNICEF open source project, and that really just delivered great energy for his company. So.
Okay. Nice. Michele, talking about SDGs and equality, and how can we use blockchain and AI to make sure that countries are equally represented?
I would say that's a big opportunity, because if you think about it, in a way, blockchain and AI are really correlated in the sense that, they're conceptually at a complete different spectrum, one and another. So on the one hand, you have the blockchain where everything can be traced back, where you always have a history of what has been going on in the blockchain. Whereas on the other side of the spectrum, you have AI, where basically, one of the most recurring problems mentioned concerning AI is the fact of the black box. So you input some data into the model and you get an output, but you don't really know how you got the output. And so again, I think here the big opportunity really is to put them together. What if we are able to implement like blockchain models into AI to be able to understand, okay, what was the model behind LLM, large language models, which created the output you got. And, starting from that, you can think, okay, now there is application not just as ChatGPT, but, more advanced one that basically you can give a goal to the tool, and it can access some resources like your bank account to reach to such goal. Basically, integrating blockchain and AI, you are able to tokenize elements, and being used by AI, by smart contract. What if, the different actions taken by AI are somehow submitted to a subcontract, a smart contract. So from this perspective, I think, again, there is really there from the real integration between blockchain and AI, that you can really know what is going on within the AI model. And starting from that, you can, take your corrective measure, or, change the data set on which, the decisions are taken, because, it's very typical at the end of the day that AI is representative of the world as it is, but there are things, that we would like to be different, diversity, inclusion, whatever. AI is somehow reflecting what we have now. And by changing the model, you can change the output of AI at the end of the day.
Okay. Flo, do you want to add something?
Yeah. I think you're raising a very interesting point about this traceability and how this could be used for AI. Because now we have those big models coming out, millions of users are using them, but actually, as you say, it's a black box. And we see already big problems around that. And then clearly those things are evolving over time. But is it normal that we don't know how they are evolving? Is it normal that we don't know what type of data is used to actually create a model and adapt it? All this needs to be, if we want this to be used by everyone, we need to understand how and why it came there. So I think indeed it could be a very interesting synergies between the two. Yeah.
Shane, do you have anything to add, or?
Yeah, just again, from UNICEF's perspective, from our focus, like a huge program across, well, different UN agencies, but UNICEF as well, is cash transfer programming. So where our beneficiaries, our clients receive cash to support like social safety net cash or like a humanitarian cash transfer scenario. And these are huge programs. There's like machine learning and AI involved in the kind of implementation of these programs. And we really see a space for blockchain in there, particularly around, we're looking, in our team, we're looking at using cryptocurrencies in cash transfer. But quite often, depending on the context that we're operating in, there can be questions around anonymity, people needing to be anonymous. And I think that this is something that for UNICEF, we'll see a bit of intersection in the coming years.
Okay, and then knowing that mostly you're operating in countries that are not super developed, right? And communicating with decision makers and policy makers. So how do you see how private sector can collaborate with institutions, either like international institutions like you or local institutions, to actually bring this adoption to a higher level and make very useful use cases, be it in education or any other?
Yeah, it's a good question. So there's lots of different ways. Institutions can invest in our venture fund or our crypto fund if they want. That's I'll put that out there.
And then venture funds can invest in
the
new
startups.
projects.
Exactly. We have a lot of different ways that we can do it, and it sometimes depends on the country that we're operating in as well. But from Office of Innovation's perspective, we're a small office in a big organization. I think there's 22,000 UNICEF employees, and there's 70 of us in the Office of Innovation. So we can work with technology providers. Yeah, we could use a little bit of help sometimes, both in terms of working with ourselves on like global projects, also supporting some of the companies that are in our investment cohorts from time to time. So taking technology expertise from private sector. I also would say that we take inspiration from the private sector as well. So UN agencies sometimes are perceived as a little bit slow, perhaps slightly behind the curve sometimes. But our office, the Office of Innovation, we see ourselves as outward-looking and forward-looking. So we look to the private sector to like guide us, inspire us, and like help us move forward.
Okay, but would there be a like scenario in which you, like UN or UNICEF or any of the UN agency whatsoever, could be kind of a link between private sector, this entire new world of blockchain and AI, and local communities, like communicate with local decision makers to facilitate the adoption?
Yeah, we do that. We do that a fair bit. So, like for example, in our crypto fund, our kind of anchor partner for the crypto fund is the Ethereum Foundation. So we have worked with them a lot, them supporting us to like develop the local ecosystems for blockchain in different countries, particularly in Latin America, actually, and hopefully in the Middle East soon as well. There is an opportunity for that. We do need to be a little bit careful, I guess. We don't want to be seen as a reseller for services, and again, this comes back to the sustainability from like a project technology kind of perspective. It would be great to like have a wonderful proprietary system coming from a private sector to a host government in one of our program countries, but the idea of them being able to sustain that is a question that we need to like consider all the time. So yeah, it's a tricky question, but yes and no.
Okay, yes, limited.
If that's okay, yeah.
Okay, yeah. But you guys are coming from private sector, so what's your experience with working with institutions and locally?
I can give it a stab. So, I don't know. I would say, from the point of view of a startup, we can take the luxury, of taking the risk of doing something and somehow leading the way, which I understand, like for a company like UNICEF, it's a bit more different. It's a bit more difficult. So I would say it's something which is reflected also in capital allocation. If you invest in a startup, you know that the risk is higher than investing, in the stock exchange. So in a way, possibly, the way forward would be, again, getting the lesson learned from us, the startup world, to take the risk which we can afford to take, and that's pathological for a startup, and eventually that's something that that's models that you can hopefully implement in the future in bigger companies which need more time, which many times they have a business model which has been working for long, they're still doing well, therefore there's no really need to change. And on the other hand, that's the risk and the advantage of such big companies. But still, I don't know. I like the idea of somehow, starting, with smaller companies and then scaling up. On the other hand, I like the idea, to do something to avoid economies of scale problems, even when it comes to AI. So giving the possibility, to have some open source models which are trained by big company or government-funded companies, which can be somehow provided to the market, with the implication that there is some positive benefits by, the government or, the AI model sustained by taxation, and then, the benefits are democratic and not just concentrated in one company.
Okay. Flo, talking about AI and skipping the ethics is not... I can't do it.
No, but maybe to jump on what you say, I think it's interesting to see that, a lot of states are actually not using open source. Yes, they use technologies from big companies. So I think it's really interesting to see that companies like associations like UNICEF are trying to put this in the middle. Because otherwise I see, for me, there is a gap because the startups are there to actually try to change the world and provide something new. But at the end of the day, what happens often is that it's just a big company that will come and purchase them, right? And that's not really the part that I would like to see. And then, because how then can you really help developing countries that are poorer, like in Africa, if you follow that path? You will never do that. You will always make your company go towards where the big ones are, and then the other one will always stay far behind. So I think there's a lot of work to do here, and I'm really happy to hear that UNICEF is funding open source project. That's great. Yeah. Trying.
Do you want to open topic of ethics
and AI?
And blockchain, after all.
Yeah. So, that's a big topic. Open topic. I think when it comes to, I would say that I think it's linked a bit to what I said before, we want to see those technology transforming our life, but we might maybe rush out too much and then skip a lot of the very important points that we need to do in order to ensure that those technologies are safe. And you can just think about autonomous driving, right? How can you link this? How can you do this in a good way? And it's clearly not just a technological question. There are a lot of transdisciplinary questions to answer, and I really feel that the path is still quite long, and it's a bit unclear actually how you can add policies on top of AI. It's an ongoing, I think, research topic. It's not something that is solved. Yeah.
I wanted to add something quickly on top of this. For as much as I don't like, the letter from Elon Musk, asking for stopping AI development, which sounded to me like for some personal interest. But on the other hand, I feel like there is the need to understand, which kind of goals do you want to reach with AI? Okay, it's nice to give the freedom to the market and the AI models, to reach whatever they reach. But on the other hand, it would be important from my perspective, again, to define, some kind of prerequisite of goals, which you want to reach, or at least in general terms, just to avoid, getting somewhere where, you were not even aware of it at the beginning, but you ended up there.
Just soaked into it.
So this is an easy one for us, of course. We have to have ethical AI. It needs to be at the core of. It's easy, but it's also difficult as well, because we don't necessarily have the levers to make it happen. But of course, ethical AI is essential. Otherwise, if we accept that there are biases that exist in models, and if we let them loose, those biases are going to make things worse for disadvantaged people and countries, and that's not something that we want to see. UNICEF has been working in this area for some time. In 2021, I think we released a policy guidance for ethical AI around children, which thankfully has been taken up by a couple of countries, or at least fed into their strategic plans for AI. We're working on our own strategic direction, strategic vision for AI as an organization. We've been working on that for some time, and then ChatGPT just threw petrol on the flames, and now it's constant all over the place. Very, very hot topic. But yeah, for us, it's clear we have to find a way to make sure that ethics are at the core of AI as we move forward. And it's not an easy thing to do. And we see a lot of discussions recently. We see the CEO of OpenAI up in front of the Senate in the US saying, "Please regulate us. Somebody come and help us." So I'm interested to see where we land for sort of trying to regulate or trying to ensure that we have an ethical approach to AI.
Okay, and then maybe the last question before we open the Q&A. After all the chat we had, where do you see the technology is going to? Obviously, AI and blockchain are really big disruptors in the system. So how do you see, maybe not in 3 years, but how do you see that the progress will work? I see very often headlines that I don't like in a way that, AI is here to take my job or something, which I have opposite opinion. But how do you see this will progress?
For me personally, I'm generally...
Personally and from the institution.
So the strategic vision for AI is not yet finalized for UNICEF, so I won't give an official comment on that one.
Then personal.
Yeah, so for me, try to look on the positive side. We often hear the line that technology is neutral, and it's how it's used, it's how it's applied, and maybe the data sets that are underpinning it. When I look at the work that we're trying to do and our beneficiaries, our clients, I'm very positive that the amazing advances we see in technology, AI, blockchain, can really close the gap for bringing up the levels of education, health, and just well-being for people around the world if we can manage to have a trickle down or transpose to those areas. So I would be positive.
Okay, good. Michele? And maybe you can also just briefly comment on, just going back to the sustainability a bit. Is it possible that we can use AI and blockchain to make this equal? So, for example, hardware produced in Asia, used in Europe, but then we pledge to plant trees in Amazon. Can we localize this and make it more balanced? So to heal the community that we are disrupting?
Yeah, I would say so. But I'm sorry, I think I will take the opportunity, to pitch as well, before we forget as well, what I was mentioning at the beginning. That's a discussion we have been thinking about within the sustainability working group at Crypto Valley Association. So we have been specifically studying the relationship between blockchain, sustainability, and AI. And basically, we came up with 3 main pillars, the ethical AI, the green AI from the energy consumption perspective, and the open AI. And we recently finished the...
But open like open source, not the open AI.
Open source AI, yeah, that's true. That's a bit ambiguous. And so we actually finished the first draft of this document where we have been considering this. So if you are a bit curious and you want potentially to contribute as well to this, get in touch with Maya or myself. And yeah, again, you will have a bit of replies to what you asked, and we propose as well, a focus on ethical AI, a framework to implement ethical AI solutions.
Flo, what do you think where is AI going and this entire
Where AI will go, I think that we will, by 5 to 10 years, we will all have personal agents, like digital twins that will be able to store all the information that our brains cannot store anymore. I used to say that for me, Google was always kind of a third hemisphere. Yes, hemisphere is only 2, but it's really a place where I don't need to store everything in my brain, and I can get access to that. And when I see the new things coming with chatbot, I just see that this will reach another level where we will just be able to have conversation with that big brain, and finally free people from trying to store everything in their brain, which is impossible. And I think this will also help us to, solve some of the challenges, because the complexity of the world in which we live and the incapacity of our brains to take into account all this complexity makes it that we cannot solve the problems that we have at hand. So I think their AI can really play a crucial role.
Okay. Questions? Come on. No one. We have a guy from UNICEF here, just to remind you.
There is one question, yeah?
Yeah. Okay.
Very interesting panel. Thank you very much. I have a question on the topic of exact merging, especially from the legal perspective between the blockchain and AI speakers. Because in the blockchain, we haven't seen this tendency of banning, in one way or another, and heavily regulating everything that concerns privacy. So basically, like the motto is become as open as you can and show everything you got. While, for example, in AI, privacy is often number one thing. Because, for example, if you use some AI technologies while working with refugees, for example, you must secure their privacy in those tools. You need to provide them the tools, including the AI ones, that would help them preserve their privacy, protect themselves from attackers, blah, blah, blah. Taking these two poles, basically, how do you see they emerging? Because there are a lot of points where they're very controversial and contradictory to each other. How do you envision the exact merging of these things? Privacy, while we do blockchain, which is anti-privacy, basically, and AI, which is kind of pro-privacy for now, but
Yeah,
how do you see it?
Yeah, I can try to answer a bit or give some thoughts on that. And I think it's a great point, but one thing to understand also is that blockchain, yes, it's a pseudonymous, so you have your public key, so it's actually like an IBAN. So if somebody gets access to that, you can indeed trace all the transactions that you did. But you also have blockchains like Zcash that are using privacy-preserving transfer. So you can actually do both in the blockchain world. You don't have only one. And then, but it's a very good point for the other side, the side of AI, is that indeed, if you have access to the model, and you will be able to understand what the model has. So you will be able to feed information into that thing. So there are ways to solve that. You have technologies like homomorphic encryption, where you will basically train your model on encrypted data, which means that if somebody cannot encrypt the data in the way you did, you will not be able to understand what the model is doing. So I think this is a path towards that. And I think that how the place of the blockchain is more on the traceability, not necessarily on storing the information that you are sending to the model. For example, in our project, when we launched chatbots on the DeepSquare Grid, you have a one-one connection to your chatbot running. There is nobody in between. But the blockchain is not aware of what I'm talking with my chatbot. The blockchain was just there to create a node that I'm requesting those resources for traceability purpose. But then the interaction with the model itself is a peer-to-peer transaction. So then if that thing is encrypted and then the model itself takes encrypted data, then I think we can merge the two.
Yeah, and just to add, so this is a huge area for some of the work that we do as well, and particularly, and I talked a little bit earlier about the cash transfer programming. And yes, sometimes very open, it's fine for people to be open and non-anonymous, but then we have plenty of examples where we do need anonymity. So we are definitely looking into this and seeing how best, like what we can see in the market, what is coming down the road, and it will be very useful for more and more of the work that we see. And unfortunately, what we see within UNICEF is that there's a higher need for humanitarian cash transfer programs. We see a lot more humanitarian disasters, conflict situations, and these are the types of incidents that increase the need for cash transfers and the need for that kind of technology as well.
Yes, please.
I had an idea that maybe you could use a blockchain to be able to understand if the information you're getting from artificial intelligence is counterfeit or disinformation, because today already it's really confusing. Is that something real? Is it something fake? Is there a way to be able to use blockchain to say, do a watermark on something to say that this is the original source of a photo or a voice or a video?
Flo?
I think it's not trivial to do that, but clearly if you store information about how the model is behaving, then indeed you can do this kind of links. But there is nothing that forces you. But for example, if you try to use image generation, so generative AI, but for image, the open source tools you see, they force the addition of a watermark, so that actually you can already know if an image is coming from an AI or if it's a real image. But nothing forces that. And since blockchain, you cannot falsify the information you have inside, for sure there is something we can do with that, right? Because at least the information we store in the blockchain cannot be changed. So this can help, but I think there is not a very easy path where we can, I would need to think. It's a very good question.
If I may quickly add, I think, like when it comes to quality of information, it will be very probably in my opinion, that there will be paying AI models where basically you have access to information which is reliable, like financial authorities or any kind of database which is storing data, and basically you will give a higher level of reliability to AI models which can access those subscription models data basically.
Anyone else? Because I have one more question. Just got inspired, Shane. With this entire AI and fake news and everything, did you see increase problem when it comes to conflict countries and information coming from conflict countries and being changed by fake news? Or is it? I guess it's not helping the problem.
Yeah, misinformation
Yes.
is a huge problem. And so, when we say technology is neutral and ChatGPT is neutral, I can ask it to do a press release on vaccination of children, why you should get your children vaccinated, why that's great. And it'll come out, reasonably okay, pretty quickly, and that can help me in my drafting. But the flip side of that is I can very easily have some pretty nasty disinformation come out. And unfortunately, that seems to move a lot quicker than boring medical details on why. So yeah, it is a huge issue. One of the kind of areas that UNICEF works in, one of the teams that we replicate across the world is social and behavioral change, so SBC we call them. And they are grappling on how best to approach this issue. It's a really, really big one. It's not something that UNICEF can solve, but it's something that we are active in trying to engage with, advocate for, and trying to find the right tools to help us with that as well.
Oh, cool. Any more questions? Last call. No. Then thank you guys for being here. Thank you.